I think I have an obsession with this type of garden now, and I'm just gonna start putting them everywhere. About a month ago, we installed a full tea garden in my Epic Gardening raised beds, and it has been really amazing actually. I love coffee because of my autoimmune conditions and my anxiety. Every time I drink it, it's pretty much guaranteed to end up giving me a panic attack. I pretty much only let myself have it like one time a week. Tea, on the other hand, has become a huge part of my journey into taking care of myself better because it has so many medicinal and health benefits. When my chronic pain started getting really bad and flaring up, I started leaning into tea really hard. I love tea. I think there's so many different variations on tea, and there's so many amazing different combinations we can do. And when I did the full tea garden, it got me thinking, like, there's so many ways you can do this on a smaller scale if you maybe don't have the space, or you've already filled up your main garden beds, but you're still excited about the idea of doing a tea garden. You can make it happen in a much smaller space. So I'm gonna show you today how I'm planting out a container garden in just one of those 24-inch kind of whiskey barrels. Also going to show you a few different recipe combinations. So this is what we're gonna be planting today, but there's so many different variations that you can do on this to make your tea garden suit your actual tastes. So I'm going to go through what we'll be planting today, and then I will show you how I prep a container that already has soil in it for new plantings. Okay, if you watched my original tea video, some of these will look familiar to you, but I'm trying to do different variations on them, and some of them are just totally new things that I don't have anywhere else in my garden. And the first one of those is going to be this blanket flower, which honestly, when I grabbed it, I just got it because I saw that Meg had it and she totally influenced me. This is a native perennial that does really well in zones 3 through 10, but it actually turns out that it's totally edible too. It's used to make medicinal teas. So this is going to be kind of the star of our show this time. I know in my big tea garden, there's generally like a hero item in the center, and then I build all the smaller stuff out around it. So that's kind of going to be the case with our blanket flower today, and this is the Arizona Sun variety. For seeds, I'm doing the classic Pacific Beauty calendula. I just have this huge bag of them, so I keep throwing them everywhere, and honestly, I'm not mad about it. These will go really late into the season, and they're just super low maintenance and have so many amazing medicinal benefits. In my Barbie tea bed, which is all the pinks and purples, and it's so cute with that giant hibiscus in it, I'm doing the purple emperor nasturtium. So in this container tea garden, I've decided to do the Alaska variegated nasturtium. I grew these last year and I got such a great variety from them. Some of them were these beautiful peachy color that I've never seen before, and they have these amazing speckled leaves. So I'm very excited to finally have a place for this one in the garden. Nasturtiums are usually grown as an annual. They will often self-seed, but they're perennial in zones 10 and up. I'm gonna throw in a few of these California giant zinnias. These get pretty giant, but it's always a fun surprise because there's a mix of colors, so you never really know what you're gonna get. If you saw my garden tour already, you might have seen that I have some culinary sage that is kind of starting to not look so great. So this is the beer garden variety of sage. This is gonna be perennial in zones 5 through 9, and it has this beautiful bushy growth pattern and wide leaves, which I don't know, I'm just kind of weirdly picky about my sage. I really like it to have these kind of thick, wide leaves that are kind of like bluish gray. I just think it's so pretty. I know we have a lot of like red and orange marigolds, so I don't have any yellow ones. So we're doing the Tishan yellow marigold today. When I picked it up from the store, I was looking for one that had a lot of these like closed blooms that had not opened yet. So I know what color they are by the fact that a couple of them are open, but I also know it has a lot of potential in it to bloom really early and fast. It wouldn't be a tea garden if it didn't have my favorite flower ever in it, snapdragons. There's so many different types of these. These ones are looking a little bit leggy. They've been in these pots a little bit too long, but I couldn't resist. I have these everywhere and they haven't started blooming yet, so it was so exciting to see these ones already coming up and to find a pack that had multiple colors in it. I love when you can get a 4-pack of something and it has every variety that you want versus having to get a 4-pack of white, a 4-pack of pink, a 4-pack of yellow. I grow Munstead lavender in the main garden bed, and I just planted an English lavender in the main tea garden bed. But this lavender is called Goodwin Creek, and I made a novice mistake with this one. I got overexcited with the lavender because it's just such a cool, like, it has these really interesting curled leaves that I've never seen before. So I just grabbed it without even looking at the tag, and it's actually only perennial in zones 7 and up, and we're zone 6, so it's kind of on the edge of like whether or not it will survive. And again, not the end of the world. I'm throwing in a container and we'll just see what happens and what makes it through the winter. At this point, the only thing I'm sure will make it through is the blanket flower and the sage, and I'm okay with that. Two things that I really never let myself plant in a garden because they can spread so aggressively are mint. I have an orange mint in the greenhouse, but it's not looking too good. I think I might have overwatered it. I'm really not sure, and somehow lost the tags to both of these in transport, but I know one of them is a banana mint, which I think is this one, and one of them is an apple mint. And supposedly this one has a banana flavor and this one has an apple flavor. I did try them both as soon as I brought them home. They're delicious, but do I taste banana and apple? Remains to be seen. Okay, so I'm going to take you over to show you the container now, and we'll talk about how I refresh a container to plant in before we get started. It feels kind of silly, but I just love a tray of flowers like this. It's just so satisfying to look at. This thing, oops, has been a game changer. So much more comfy when we have to be down low. So this was the whiskey barrel that I had all my very earliest leafy greens in, and if you saw my garden tour, I also had a broccoli in here and I have this celery. So I decided celery can stay in the tea garden because we're going to use it to make celery juice, so it's still in the beverage category and we're not going to exclude it for that reason. I did pull out most of the remaining lettuce that was in here because it had bolted, and I thought this one was okay, but honestly I think I'm just gonna harvest it and eat it now because it's gonna be in our way. So this raised bed soil is pretty depleted, and you can tell because when you rake your fingers through it, it's really dusty and crumbly and it doesn't hold together. And you'll also find there's a lot of like root structures in here. If it had been something where I had a very well established like broccoli plant in here that I knew had a big dense root system, I would actually probably pour all this out and not necessarily sift it, but just try to shake out any of those roots, although sifting it can be good, especially if you think you might have grubs in the soil. This soil is not holding water very well at all. I'm digging down like 4 inches before I actually hit cooler soil that feels like it has any moisture in it. So my main concerns here are replenishing the surface so that it can hold water and improve the structure, and we're also going to feed it. There's tons of different ways you could add fertilizer to this container. You could do compost, but because it is a container, I prefer to keep things lighter than compost in here. And I just find that in terms of low maintenance and ease, granular fertilizer is gonna last the longest and be the easiest to apply. So actually, before I even mix up this soil or add new soil to the top as an amendment, I'm gonna put the granular fertilizer in first so that as I'm stirring it, it gets mixed into the lower layers of the soil. There are measurements on the side of this that you are welcome to follow. I use my gut when I'm fertilizing. You need a lot less than you think you do, but in this case where I know is fairly depleted, I am going to do a little bit more than I otherwise might. In a conventional garden, I would be more likely to tell you when you take the old plants out to just cut the base of the roots and leave the roots in the soil so that that energy that they took up can compost down and return to the soil. But in a container, it's really important that we get those roots out so that new plants don't get root bound. I did pull everything out that was in here by the roots, which means there's really not a lot of clumps to break up. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I went about 4 inches down and I'm not meeting with much resistance. So we've just kind of fluffed and loosened that soil. And there's 2 more steps that we need to do before we start planting. I'm gonna amend the soil with some Coast of Maine potting mix. And I'm trying to add 2 to 3 inches of fresh soil to the top of this container. Just smooth that out. And the next thing that I need to do is pre-water this soil because that bottom layer was so dry. And we are adding seeds to this. I want to make sure that the soil is already damp before I add those seeds, because if I put the water in afterward, it's a lot more likely to displace the seeds from where I put them, change the depth of that seed, which can affect germination rate. So we just want to make sure we're thoroughly watering this soil in. All right. I recently discovered my new favorite feature about this ledge is I can literally just hook my hose onto it. So easy. So if I were starting over from scratch with this container, I would actually probably fill it about halfway, then place my containers in and fill around them so that I don't have to dig these holes. But that's what we're doing today. We're actually filling a pre-existing container. So we're gonna start with the blanket flower because it is the largest. Let's pop that out a little bit tight in there. This is kind of late in the season to be planting a whole new garden, at least here in 6B. I'm just slightly loosening this ball. It can take it. Another thing I maybe shouldn't have done was decide to do this planting on a 93-degree day, but you know, we can't control for the weather and things gotta go in when they gotta go in. Our mints, I'm going to have trail, but I do need to be mindful of this because they could totally take root in the lawn. We'll just be very mindful of cutting them back frequently so that they don't. Whoa. Yeah. Mint is so resilient though, it doesn't even care when it's this root bound. You can just rip off those bottom parts and it's never gonna know the difference. Plants are a lot less tender in general than we give them credit for, I think. There's a life lesson in there somewhere. I always tell people who are scared to start a garden and fail, like, plants want to live. They want to live, so just give them what they need and they'll take care of the rest. I have a feeling this one's root bound too. Oh yeah, this is very different roots. We will do our lavender. I'm not a huge fan of these pots. They're okay as long as the plant isn't already root bound, but like they start to grow through them fairly quickly in my opinion, but at least they are biodegradable. What do here? Lavender is a Mediterranean plant that may be an issue in this bed if it's getting more water than it likes because everything else in this needs more water, but I'm hoping the fact that it's a container garden, it's toward the edge, so it should dry out the fastest, will help kind of counterbalance that. I'm kind of working around the edges first, actually. So I'm gonna do my sage right here. This is what I mean. It's like really hard to pull off, and it actually is embedded in the root structure, and it just seems like that would be problematic. It almost makes it root bound without being root bound because it's bound by the pot. And at this point you're probably thinking this container is full, and you're not wrong. By normal spacing requirements I would say I am packing this, but I'm probably not going to put all these marigolds and all these snapdragons in here because we still do have our seeds to do. And I've just been planting really intensively this year. Last year I did not, and I had a lot of garden gaps, and I'm finding that this intensive planting, like everything is happier. A lot of spacing requirements are based on industrial agricultural standards and don't need to be followed to a T in a home garden as long as you're aggressive about fertilizing, because a lot of the issue isn't so much a competition for root space, although that is a large part of it. It's also competition for resources, and in a container especially, there's even more of that competition, so we have to be extra mindful. Now, I do have those tiki torches that stick up in the center here, so that's why I'm avoiding the very middle. And I don't mind crowding the mint because we know it can handle it. It can hold its own. Our nasturtiums can trail, so we'll make sure we have space for that there. We'll do one more Snapdragon in here. We're moving on to our seeds. I'm gonna finish off this packet. These go 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep. I'm just gonna aggressively seed that calendula right there and end up thinning it out. But I'm just gonna do one zinnia, and we'll just water this in really fast because we already added water. We don't have to worry as much about the seeds that we added getting displaced, but I am doing this on kind of a lower pressure setting right now so that we don't displace those seeds. So that is the first container kind of recipe done. There's a few other different combinations that you could do. I mean, there's really endless combinations, but I have a few specific ones in mind that you might want to try. I decided to normalize showing you guys me sitting and taking a break because you guys keep reminding me in the comments, don't forget to take a break because you know my fatigue is getting to me. So I appreciate it. And I'm proving to you that I'm taking a break right now. I'm sitting down in the shade out of the hot sun. We're going to talk a little bit about the different recipes for a tea garden you might want to try. But let me know if you have any combination suggestions down in the comments because I'm sure the options are limitless. I have the full 3-bed tea garden, but I think you could very easily break down each of those 3 beds into a miniaturized version as a container tea garden instead. So starting with the first bed, those options would be alyssum, calendula, stevia, marigolds, and pineapple sage. The center bed is my pink Barbie dream house bed. And that one has hibiscus, or you could do roselle if you prefer, but hibiscus is totally edible as a tea plant as well. Purple emperor nasturtiums, purple violas or pansies, English lavender and chamomile. And the third container tea garden recipe is a savory tea garden with all kind of green plants like parsley, basil, oregano, thyme, rosemary, and dill. And that's more of just a general savory herb garden. All those savory herbs also make incredible medicinal teas. That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for gardening with me, and happy growing.